Talk about domestic violence, and I'll let each one tell you who they are, and then we can go into the show. And on my left,
Hi, I'm Shamell Foster. I'm a life and leadership coach, and I'm a part of Citizen Against Abuse member.
Hi, my name is Patrick Dati, and I'm an author, public speaker, and an advocate for anti-bullying, child abuse, and domestic violence.
My name is Linda Derusha. I'm the social worker with the Romeoville Police Department, and I'm a committee member for this organization.
Hello, my name is Reverend Harris. I am the chair of Citizens Against Abuse. I'm also with the Bolingbrook Police Department.
Reverend Harris. Now we talk about domestic violence, and this is something that's been going on for quite a number of years. Tell us what this is all about. What entails domestic violence, and how did we get here?
Well, you know, domestic violence has been going on since the beginning of time, you might say. How do we stop it is where we should try to figure out, because how we got here, we've been here for so long. And since we have, we need to figure out how we can stop this abuse. And that's what our topic this year is about. It's about bullying in today's society. And we all know that in today's society, it's full of bullying.
So when we talk about bullying, is that necessarily something that goes under that heading? Because domestic violence comes in a number of different headings, right?
Yes, sir. And
All
that goes under the heading of domestic violence. And when you talk of Citizens Against Abuse, we handle all domestic violence. Because believe it or not, when you talk about domestic violence could be under any level. Today, in today's society, you have so many different levels of domestic violence until it's not funny. But bullying is the topic that we're picking up because we have children today that are killing themselves because they're being bullied by their peers in school, cyberbullying, and different things of that nature. And we have to stop it because these are our children that are taking their lives.
Now, Linda, you work for the Romeoville Police Department. I'm sure you've seen your share of domestic violence.
Yes, sir.
Tell me, how does that play into the police department? What is your role in actually dealing with this?
My role comes in after the police have been to a person's home. And again, it can be any kind of violence that happens in your house is kind of how we define domestic violence. It can be a child coming home from school and talking about what had happened in school. It can be between partners. It can also be between ex-boyfriend, girlfriend, husbands, wives, whatever. There's some kind of aggravating incident. The police come, kind of settle everything down, and then I come in and figure out what we can do to not have this happen again.
That's a big job, because trying to stop it they've been trying to stop it forever. Patrick, you've written a book, I understand, and it's something on bullying, right? Could you explain what that's all about?
Sure. My book is actually an autobiography of my life, and I lived with traumatic issues. I was molested when I was 9 years old by the serial killer John Wayne Gacy, and got away. I was the first victim that got away. And then my brother was an abuser. It was sibling bullying, and my brother beat me from the time I was nine or 10 years old until he attempted to kill me in 2011. So I've lived with, this book started as a diary. My psychiatrist recommended that I write a diary to therapeutically release what I had gone through. And I work in the publishing industry, and a good friend of mine is a writer and read my diary, and he said, this book is going to save people's lives, well, the diary, and we're going to turn it into a book. And I said, you're crazy, no one's going to want to read it. And then we pulled it together, and I got published. And it's amazing with social media and people who have read my book. I get emails to my website, people replying to me on social media, and they're asking me for advice. And I'm not in a situation like you. I can't advise them other than you need to get therapy, you need to see a psychiatrist, you need to resolve what's going on with yourself. But I can't give you advice. I'm not a counselor. I'm not, licensed. But it's amazing how I've impacted people's lives since even before the book came out.
Well, we want to thank you for being on the show, because going through what you have gone through, everyone knows about that history, and everyone has read about the one that got away, and to have you here now talking about those experiences that you had with John Wayne Gacy, it's something that people will never forget. It'll always be in the back of someone's mind when you hear about it. So we really appreciate you taking your time out to come and probably enlighten people that will help them get to the next step in their life when they've gone through a domestic violence. And you've gone through the ultimate domestic violence situation in your life. So really thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Shanad, tell us about your program and what you're involved in. How does that work with domestic violence?
I'm a life coach, and that helps with domestic violence because it allows somebody, after the fact, after they've already processed what they've been through and they're ready to come out, to empower them to have the tools to come out of something like that and to redefine their who. So they might have been a certain type of person or felt like a certain type of person when they felt victim to a circumstance. Then with your life coach, you can go through piecing together what you actually want to become and making that your new reality, where you're not held victimized to your situation in the past. You can be whoever you want to be.
Okay, where is your program located, and how do you reach people that actually have gone through domestic violence?
Okay, so I'm a part of the Citizen Against Abuse organization, and that's how I reach people in domestic violence. As a life coach, I'm not just strictly for people who have domestic violence. However, I do work with them. My main focus is with teenagers and young adults of any circumstance. So we do help people who are coming against any kind of abuse of any kind of scale.
Wow. You're a kind of young person to be going through something like that, and actually be on the cutting edge of helping someone get through those bad times in their life. Reverend Harris, now there's an event coming up.
Yes, sir.
Could you talk about that? Where it's going to be?
Oh, yes. Our event is, this is our 19th annual Speak Out March and Rally. It's going to be at the Levy Center, and that's at 241 Canterbury Lane right here in Bolingbrook. Again, Patrick Dati is going to be our keynote speaker. Our topic this year is bullying in today's society. And as I was doing some research on children being bullied in schools and how many lives have been lost, the numbers have been staggering. Anywhere between 300 to 500 children have lost their lives since 2016 by being bullied, by taking their own life. I found out that there was either between 8 to 16 here in the state of Illinois, and at least 3 in the surrounding area. So it's something that is really needed, and we really need to address it now, because when is the time to stop it? The time to stop it is now. These are our children, and we need to start listening to them so that we can help them, because if we don't, we're going to lose them.
Linda, now working with the police department, you hear this in schools all the time by someone being bullied. You've seen it and heard it from some of the shootings that have happened across America. Hundreds of shootings that have happened where someone has bullied someone and they came back to the school to retaliate against either a group of people or a person. When you hear something like that, what actually comes to your mind? How can you talk to young people and say, what are we going to do? What is your message? Why are you doing this? How do you deal with that in the police department?
Well, fortunately, I have a whole host of officers that I get to work with, and we have one specifically assigned to Romeoville High School. I know Bolingbrook, I think, has 2 or 3 investigators.
That's true, right.
So as soon as incidences start coming up where kids talk and rumors get around, and as soon as those rumors start getting to people who can do anything about it, then the detective gets called, then I get called, and then we start talking to that student. We start getting a hold of the people who are doing the bullying, and then we do this all in the school in front of the kids. And that's a more effective message than me standing in front of a classroom saying, this is what you should do and this is what you shouldn't do. And if somebody is doing this to you, then you need to tell somebody, because they're not really going to, especially kids in high school. They're not going to say anything. So we listen to the rumors.
So in a case like that, you know, because we know there is such an epidemic of bullying that's going on across America, and it doesn't always just have to be someone in school. It can be an adult.
Right.
It can be an elderly person that's being bullied. Then what's the message? How do we get that message out? If we can't talk to them in the classroom, so how do we get that message out to young people that think they got to go out and bully someone just because they're who they are?
Facebook is a good tool for some of those things. Any kind of media. I have younger children. My children are 20, and everything they do now is texting and Facebook and Snapchat, and the list goes on. And so if we can get messages on those places, then the kids will be more likely to see them. Because again, they don't. I'm older, so I look at TV, I watch news, I read the newspaper. Then they're not going to do anything like that. So social media is a big deal as far as getting messages out.
And it can be an advantage or it can be a disadvantage.
Yeah, right. It's kind of a double-edged sword.
Right. I mean, I've dealt with a number of young people that have passed in the district, and one of the worst things to me is to go to the next morning and talk to that parent about their child that have died because someone bullied them and they took their own life. That is tough to deal with, you know, and to see that parent's face and go, why? How does this happen? Patrick, I'm just amazed that you're here, for one thing. What message would you give young people or anyone that's sitting out in the audience that think that they have to be a bully? And what would you give the message to the person that is being bullied? How do they deal with that?
Well, you know, my opinion is that bullying starts in the home. A bully becomes a bully because they're in a family that's probably domestic violence, and they're being abused by their father, their mother. And so that's how they react and release what pain that is going on at home. But, you know, I tell kids that I speak to nationally about anti-bullying. I think in the school district and the schools themselves, there needs to be more education. I have a very good friend of mine. She's a professor in Gainesville, Florida, and she speaks nationally on anti-bullying and domestic violence. And she said to me that it's amazing, Patrick, that there's some school districts, like up on the North Shore and Kenilworth and Glencoe, the parents don't want her there because they don't want to admit that their kids are bullies. And so I think that, you know, young people when I'm speaking and I do Q&As, you know, sometimes parents will ask, you know, what do I need to do? How do I see the signs? And you know, it's your child coming back home from school being isolated from you and not conversing the way they were before. So, you know, I think it all I think more education needs to be done with parents and the children in general, and it has to be done through the school districts and the school systems.
And I know sometimes that's hard to do. When you go to school, kids go to school and parents look at it, kids go to school to be educated. They want them to be educated, you know, reading, writing, arithmetic, and all that stuff. And then when you bring a curriculum in there, sometimes you can call it a curriculum about bullying, and sometimes people just feel kind of shy away from that because they know it's a topic that is just so prevalent to what's happening in America today, and not just America. And they don't want to touch that because it becomes the taboo of what are we saying? And I'm sure you do have a point. It has to start somewhere. So Ms. Foster, how does it start in the home? How do we get across to parents, your child is a bully, he needs to stop?
Well, I would say that it starts from just speaking with your children. And by that I mean actually getting their story. A lot of times children feel like they can't speak out, or that I've tried, or they've tried in different kind of ways and they haven't gotten the message across. And me specifically, I have decided to homeschool my child. And a part of that is because I saw that people do send their children to school to learn, the arithmetic, any kind of academic, but you lose the value of life and who you are and the purpose of life sometimes that connect to a higher power, your authentic self. And Patrick was saying earlier, the power of stepping into yourself, embracing your story. And that right there is a lot of the inner work that you need to do, which will prevent things like bullying, or even stop and let a bully see that, oh, I am a bully myself. So once they do that inner work, then they won't feel ashamed, and they can know that they can redefine who they are at that moment.
So, Reverend Harris, what causes a person actually to be a bully? Is it something that, I mean, you're smiling, so I'm sure you're going there. But what actually causes a person to become a bully?
Well, a lot of times when you see a kid being a bully is because in the household, the parents are bullies. I mean, because being a bully is not something a kid is born to be. It is something that a kid is taught to be. So it's just like domestic violence. A kid that's coming up in a domestic violence home that's being abusive, where if his father's beating up his mother, this kid's going to do one or two things. He's going to either be the best husband he can be to his wife, or he's going to be the worst person you ever want to meet on this earth because of the example that was set. To be a bully, they see that set in the household. So automatically they're being trained at home. This is the way you go out in the world to survive. And if this is what I must do, then automatically they always look for the person that is the weaker vessel. You never see a bully go up to someone that's strong or big that they think can take them down. They always go to the person that's timid, the person that doesn't speak up, the person that's quiet, that doesn't mess with anyone. That's who the bully always targets. He targets those type of people until one day that person wakes up and says, enough's enough. He grabs a gun and he goes to school. That's why we need to stop it. But it starts at home.
And Linda, how do we get that across? I know you said what you do with the police department. I mean, how can you sit there and talk to like 3 or 4 kids that have been bullied all their life? That's the only thing they know. They're afraid to go to school. They're afraid to do anything. And we always say, what is a safe school? A safe school is where a teacher can feel comfortable and safe teaching in her classroom, and a kid can feel comfortable and safe in learning in that teacher's classroom. But if you've got a kid that's sitting there and you got Johnny over here that's constantly bullying this kid, what is the therapy behind helping that kid get over this?
The therapy behind the thing is technically called finding their self-esteem. It's who their inner core person is, and we have to help them find that, because when they find their inner core, they're not timid anymore, they're not really shy anymore, and then they start talking back to their bully. You'll find more times than not, when you start talking back to your bully and you don't let them push your buttons in common language, is that then they go away and they find someone else to intimidate. So when I'm working with kids who are victims of bullies, that's where we start, is we have to find the inner person, and we bring that forward then.
Well, sometimes isn't it hard though for a parent to recognize and actually try to correct that?
For the parents of the children being bullied, not so much. For the parents of the children who are the bullies, yeah, it's very hard to get them to, because I have had people stand in my office and go, you cannot be talking about my son, and their son is under arrest in the back because of some incident that had happened at school that at one point had gotten physical, so they were arrested for assault. And the mom is standing there saying, no, it can't be my son. Like, well, then we misidentified this child because I know it's yours. So, and it's a real standard case of denial when I'm talking to the parents of the bullies.
Wow. Patrick, let's talk about your book. We don't want to give too much info because you're going to be the keynote speaker at the Citizens Against Domestic Violence. Let's talk a little about your life and how you've gotten here based on your history.
Well, as I said, it started at a young age. When I'm the youngest of 5 children, and when I was 2, I had a severe case of bronchitis, and I was in the hospital for a few days. And when I came home, my mother started to daunt on me because I was the baby, and She felt like I needed additional attention. And my next sibling, who's 3 years older than me, was my bully. And he beat me from an early age, cracked my head open, rushed to the emergency room, 7 years old, split my lip open, rushed to the emergency room, 12 years old, gave me a concussion, rushed to the emergency room. And every time the doctor would ask my father, what happened to your son? My father would say, boys will be boys. And then we would come home, and my father would beat my brother. And then I would go to bed at night, and my brother would put a pillow over my head and beat me more. So it was a cycle that just kept on going around and around and around.
So how do you parents, I mean, parents see that, and I understand what you're saying, boys will be boys, but that's not boys being boys. That's boys being very violent and abusive.
Yeah, it's, my mother, well, I started my advocacy work before the book came out in 2011, and my brother had, we were at a family function. My brother's a cocaine addict and an alcoholic, and my mother had us siblings there to go over my father's will. He had passed away a few months earlier, and my brother was intoxicated by the time I got there. I was supposed to bring wine, and he just started at me in front of everyone in the family, screaming at me, yelling at me, and everyone just kind of froze, and like they always did, and he threatened to kill me. And I looked at my family and I said, did you hear what he just said? And they all kind of just were in denial. And I said, you people are crazy. And then my brother picked up a knife and he chased me out of my mother's house down the block until I got away. My best friend picked me up. We went to the police station. I filed order of protection against my brother, and have not had any communication with him since. So, that's really what pushed me to become an advocate. My first website is You and Me Can Stop Bullies, and I created it to educate people on sibling bullying. It's a type of bullying that most people don't talk about. And for me, I was afraid to be at home with him, and let alone we shared the same bedroom.
It then seemed like your life just got progressively worse.
Yeah, basically, when you've been abused, for example, after being raped by John Wayne Gacy when I was 9, I went into this, I was a straight A student. I was this happy-go-lucky kid. I ended up flunking the 3rd grade. I couldn't concentrate. I isolated myself from all my friends. I wasn't vocal to my parents anymore. And in that era, and my father is first generation from Italy, and it was like this taboo that my family felt like they couldn't open that box, because then our family, our relatives, would see dysfunctionality and shame.
Wow. Ms. Foster, now when we talk about, like Patrick was saying, and you sitting there talking to your kid, some student, and that student is a victim of being bullied, what do you tell the child that's being bullied all the time? What do you tell them? How do you get them to get out of that, and what are they supposed to do? How do they deal with it? What's your message to them?
It's really just to understand that they don't have to be a bully anymore, that they don't have to be a victim anymore to the bullying, that they can find, like Linda was saying, find out their inner self, what they're really, what they really can do, their inner power, their confidence, and once their self-esteem starts to rise, they can take further steps to be whatever they choose to be. So if they no longer want to be a victim of that, they don't have to. And it's all about the core thoughts. So if a person believes, if the child believes that they're going to be bullied tomorrow, bullied the day after that, that's how they're going to behave. That's what the reality is going to be like. If they believe I can do something about this, they're going to start to step outside of that box that they were in before and start to take extra steps to make sure that they are avoiding at any kind of cost, being that victim, being that in that same thought process that they were before, and thinking about things differently, where they're able to actually not be that victim anymore and to be somebody who can stand up for themselves.
Talking about standing up for themselves, now, could we look at a bully as being a weak person himself? Because you never see a bully go up against a boxer or some martial art person, somebody that's a football player. You know, they, like you say, they always picked on that weaker vessel.
Right. Well, that would automatically say that that bully is a bully. You know, it's just like with domestic violence. When you normally see a man beating up a woman, it's because he's afraid of another man. You can't pay him to jump on a man, but he'll jump on a woman because she's a weaker vessel. Unless he finds a woman that will fight back, and then he'll run from her. And that's the same thing with a bully. When a bully finds out that you will fight him back, he will leave you alone because automatically he becomes afraid. Now you become the aggressor, and that's what the bully don't want. So, and that's why the bully doesn't pick on anyone that he knows that would automatically stop his aggression. So as long as I can pick on you and you humble down to me, bow down to me, and make me feel superior over you, then I'm going to continue to do what I'm doing to you. But the minute that I am no longer superior, then I must change my paradigm and find someone else to pick on. And that's what the bully does.
And in school, we talk about school too, because we know that in school there is a zero tolerance for fighting, and you have a young person that is being bullied, and you have the bully. The young person is afraid to fight back because the consequences are going to be the same for him as well as the bully. Doesn't that kind of weaken his way of trying to protect himself or not be a victim anymore?
Well, I think what happens there is sometime in the school system, and I can attest to this, I had a young nephew that was being bullied in the school. And he went and told the teacher, and the teacher told him that, you know, you should not be a tattletale. Mm-hmm. You know, you shouldn't come and tell. And my thing was, because we went up to the school, and my wife, being a school teacher, talked to this teacher, and she said, oh, no, this is the way we teach them, that they should not tell on each other. You know, they should keep that stuff to themselves. And my thing was, and I explained to her, I says, ma'am, I'm also with the police department. Why would you tell this kid not to tell? You'd want this kid to come out and be vocal, because as long as he's vocal, we can stop violence. But as long as you are dumbing him down, then that means you're giving him the right to do whatever he feels necessary to protect himself.
And we always tell kids, I know in Valley View, that if someone is bullying you or causing you some kind of problem, go to the nearest adult and
Yes.
tell them.
Right.
But if you're telling this kid that, no, you shouldn't be a tattletale, you shouldn't do that, it doesn't give this kid an avenue. So what is his outcome? He's gonna have some kind of aggression with him.
Correct.
And he's gonna take it out in a very serious manner. That's why we got so many shootings. And when you talk to the shooter that survived, they say, well, I was bullied, I talked to whoever, and nobody paid me any attention.
And that's exactly what happens. We need to stop that. And the only way we can stop that is we got to take a better stance. You know, we need to first take a different stance as adults. Instead of saying, well, you know, being a tattletale, I should applaud you coming to me, because that means, first of all, you trust me. Okay? You trust me enough to come to me and say, look, this is what's going wrong. Meaning that I have the ability to help make a difference. But now when I shut you down, then I'm giving you the right to do whatever you feel that is necessary. Meaning, if it means take your own life, I'm responsible, because guess what? When I had the opportunity to speak up for you, to step in on your behalf, I did nothing. And that's what's happening. You got too many folks that are supposed to be, quote unquote, the parent figure that actually does nothing. And if you're doing nothing, that means you are part of the problem instead of being part of the solution. We need solutions to stop bullying. We got enough problems.
Mm-hmm. Now, Linda, let's take it to a higher step now. When you have a marriage, mm-hmm. and you have a lady that's trying to be the good wife, trying to be the perfect parent, and their husband is the bully. What makes a woman stay in that relationship and continue to get this kind of treatment?
Well, there's not a quick answer for that because it
I know,
depends
that's why
on
I
the
asked you.
woman. I've probably talked to 1,000 women and I've gotten different answers from all of them, but it basically comes down to a power and control issue. The husband has all the power, the woman has none. And to keep peace and quiet in the house, she has to do whatever he says, however he says to do it. And the first time she crosses the line and tries to do anything different than any of that is when he's all of a sudden is blackening her eye. Part of that as well is the husband, when they're first dating, the husband can be very charismatic and very caring, and the whole thing, I'm going to take care of you and you're not going to have to worry about anything. And I'm sorry, I'm rolling my eyes, I know, because I've heard this often enough. And that's what he starts doing. And then pretty soon she's not working because he's taking care of her. She's not talking to any of her friends because he's taking care of her. And she's not even talking to her family, again, because he's taking care of her. So he takes and isolates her and doesn't let her talk to anybody or do anything or say anything. And again, when she decides one day she's going to say something, he's going to blacken her eye or worse.
And and that you hear of that all the time. And I know that question always comes out. I know we've heard it at Citizens Against Domestic Violence. We've heard it at Take Back the Night. And they ask the woman, why do you stay in a relationship like that? And you kind of hit a number of the points on head when they say it's a control factor. If the guy's making all the money and she isn't working, then naturally she doesn't want to give up her house, she doesn't want to give up her kids, and it makes for a bad situation.
It does.
But then it goes into a cycle where she becomes, I'm tired of this, enough is enough. Now we got a serious problem because she becomes the aggressor, and that's not a good
No,
ending.
it's really not a good thing.
Right.
Hopefully, at some point before that happens, there's been some intervention that has happened, and she has been given the assets that she needs, which is, again, part of what I do with the police department is I make sure that they have the assets that they need. That when you ever get to the point where you're going to leave, and the big thing I do with everybody is safety plans. If you see him starting to escalate, where can you go? What can you do? Do you have a bag of clothes you can stash somewhere? Important papers, Social Security card, driver's license, whatever, medication, stash some meds somewhere where if you have to run out of the house, it's in a spot where you can grab it and just go. That you don't have to worry about anything, different escape routes, because he's going to block the doors. Is there a window you can get out of? And then find your safe place. And we start there. And, don't do anything that's going to aggravate the situation. Just get out and call, and we'll come and get you, and we'll get you into a safe place. Guardian Angel, through their Groundworks program, has an amazing domestic violence counseling shelter and the whole thing, and they help these ladies who have gotten the courage to get out non-violently arrange a new life, and they're very great with that.
You've given some good points. And that's something women should hear, have a plan. So often women don't have a plan. They just take it day to day and figure, okay, he's going to stop. He's going to change. He told me he's never going to do it again. And he does it time and time again until it becomes even progressively worse. And then someone's life is in jeopardy. Women need to hear this over and over again. Have a plan. And just like you just said, you've talked to hundreds of women and told them of that plan, but so often they don't listen because of that control factor, and they don't want to give up their security of being in a house, but that's something that people really need to hear. Patrick, therapy, how do you tell someone that when there is a problem, that therapy is available for them? How do you reach them and tell them that?
It's interesting you asked that. I'm just getting done with my second book, and the working title is You Never Really Get Over It. And my book is all centered around depression and mental health. And for me, I never get over it. I hear the lock of that bathroom door in Goblet's department store where John Wayne Gacy tried to kidnap me every day of my life. I'm still in therapy. So I tell people, you know, you don't get over it. You know, you can go to therapy, you could see your psychiatrist, your therapist, which I have both, and you can get on medication that will help you with the depression. But in all honesty, as being a speaker and a spokesperson and an advocate, I'm still not over it. And it's hard for people to understand. But when you've been abused, your life becomes a cycle. That's what you're attracted to. You know, I was in, several relationships that were domestically abusive. And what's interesting is 2 years ago in October for Domestic Violence Month, I was contacted through Facebook, a Chicago police officer that works in the domestic violence unit was connected with me through my attorney who deals with domestic violence, and she said, "Who is this guy?" You know, and she told him he's an advocate and he also speaks besides anti-bullying on domestic violence. And I was in a domestic violence, my first LGBT relationship, and I have a scar on my arm from him throwing me down a flight of stairs. And part of it is interesting because when they hired me, the Chicago Police Department, to speak at their vigil 2 years ago, they didn't tell anybody on the panel, which were senators and judges in the court system, and they wanted everyone to be surprised except Amy Rule, Rahm Emanuel's wife, was aware, and they gave her a copy of my book, and she read it. And when I came on stage, I was the last one to speak. And every person that spoke talked about women and domestic violence. They never mentioned a man being in a domestic violence situation. And they were shocked. And some of the police officers, men, were crying when they heard my speech because 85% of men never come forward about their abuse, whether it be sexual abuse, domestic violence. And I was one of those statistics. And, finally, you got to get to a breaking point. But I think the biggest part of what I'm doing right now, and I don't want to sound sexist, is I am the voice of men that don't want to speak out for themselves. The domestic violence police force in Chicago, the officers told me that there are so many men that do not report domestic violence. They told me about one instance where a woman called and said she was her husband was beating her. When they got to the scene, she had ran him over with a car and beat him with a bat, and she didn't have a scratch on herself. And they said to him, "You need to report her." And he's like, "No, I can't do that. I can't do that." And they talked him into filling out a report that he was domestically abused.
You know, you brought up a great point, and I'm going to let Ms. Foster, talk to this. When you say men that are abused by whoever, and they really don't want to come forward with it, how do you get young boys to come forward with it? Because, it's that macho thing. I don't want people to think I'm weak, so I'm not going to. But now we're talking about grown men. Why is that?
Why are we talking about grown men?
Why are we talking about grown men that does not want to come forward when they are domestically abused?
Because the stereotypes that are out there, and with society, the way that society is, if a guy can't handle a girl slapping him in the face, they're a punk. There's some kind of label that's attached to it. And just like what Patrick's saying, when the lady called saying that she was getting abused by her boyfriend, and then they show up and it's opposite way around, most times out of 10, if the guy wasn't ran over, they would have came right away to the guy trying to arrest the guy or see what happened, not even trying to hear the story. So it's in people's mindset already that it's always the women who are being victimized by the men. So a young guy or older man, they're not gonna be okay to speak up. because they already feel like somebody's going to be looking at them in a certain kind of way because of the box that everybody's in. Society wants you to be a certain way or wants you to feel like abuse only comes from this way. And that the fact that women are supposedly weaker than men. And so what harm can she really do to you? And so it's about a person really stepping into who they are and exploring their values and even realizing, like what Patrick was saying, you know, in a situation like that, you have to see what it is about you that's attracting this to you, because energy attracts like energy. So if you are constantly getting into relationships like this where you may be a man who's attracting female violence or any kind of relationship violence or vice versa, it's something about you that you're holding attached to a value that you have where you haven't really explored what it is about you that's attracting this type of person to you.
You know that, I've heard this before, but how does this work? I mean, a person that says, well, yes, I'm a victim, but I'm going to continue to be a victim because I don't know how to get out of being a victim. What message can you tell that person? Because that cycle is eventually going to end and something's bad is going to happen.
Mm-hmm. So what you do is you just have that conversation with the person and see how it's benefiting them to become a victim, because sometimes, although I know it sounds weird that being a victim can benefit a person in a way, but sometimes it does, whether it's the fact that people are always checking on them or coming to their aid, or that they don't have to do much because other people are going to step up and do it. And even being in an abusive relationship, sometimes it's because, that guy has the money and he's going to take care of me, or we have the house together. Because somebody's going to take care of you. So to see what it is that's causing it, and then explore those options. Because once you realize how it's benefiting you, why you are even okay to stay is somewhat comfortable for you, then you can start finding those benefits in other ways where then you can empower yourself to step away from that.
Well, it's almost like the lady that's in an abusive relationship decides that, no, I don't want to leave because I've got security here. And that security keeps me from moving on to the next level or moving out of danger, which could cause them to be more in danger because of that. And with Patrick, it's just amazing, the life that he's gone through, and to be a victim of a person that is so widely known as being an abuser, that he's here and got away, and now he's telling his story, the person that got away and why he got away and how he got away, and how other people can keep from being a victim just based on what he's telling them. Is that right?
Yes, definitely. And I see that, speaking to young men and women, I speak at the Center on Halsted in Chicago, to these young kids who are gay, lesbian, bisexual, transgender. They are kind of like shut out from their family at an early age, and they gather to the city. They have nowhere to go, and they develop relationships with people that can help them survive so they don't have to live on the street. And then that usually turns into an abusive relationship. And there's no way for them to get out because they can't go back home. Some of these kids, hadn't even graduated high school yet. The message I try to give them is that, there's hope. I educate them on, how to put together a resume, how to do an interview, and find another outlet to get themselves on track, and, kind of telling them that there is hope. I'm living proof of that.
And I'm sure there'd be more young people, older people, will be more willing to listen to you because you've been there and been in that situation. And you're talking from experience rather than a textbook. And most people will listen to that because you know the highlights and the dangers of all that's happened just based on your experience, and what's happening in your life. Reverend Harris, let's talk about this event again. How did you get Patrick? This is just something that is so important. This is going to be a huge,
We had a committee that was together, and when the committee got together, they were supposed to first come up with a topic, and then afterwards they had to select a speaker for the topic. And in selecting a speaker for the topic, they told me about Patrick Dati. And they said, well, we don't know this, that, and the other. And I said, well, get me the information and let me reach out to him. And I reached out to Mr. Dati, and he called me back, and he and we had a long, I think it was email conversation, something I'm not really good with, but we had a long email conversation and everything. And afterwards, he said, well, you know, Reverend Harris, I'll be glad to come out and speak for you. And it done my heart good, because this is something that we really need to address. And the funny thing about it is you don't hear men addressing this situation. You know, because again, we're supposed to be the stronger sex. You know, we're not the weaker vessel, but we're not smart enough to say, wait a minute, something is going wrong and we need to stop it. See, that's where something has been shut down in us, because I feel like this: if you are hurting and you need a doctor, you're going to cry out for a doctor, right? You're not going to just stay hurting. If you know that you're about to have a heart attack, you're going to sit there and no, you're going to say, help me. Well, the same thing. If you're in an abusive situation, male or female, you should say, help me. Because that's the only way that things can change, is when you step out of your box. But a lot of people don't want to step out of the box. They feel that it's an embarrassment, me being a man, being abused, and me telling somebody, oh, that's embarrassing. People will look down on me. Well, guess what? If I'm constantly being abused, eventually they're going to look down on me, and I ain't going to be able to see them, because I'm going to be in a box. So if I don't want to be that way, then I need to speak out and be heard now. And so the topic bullying in today's society came about because we were looking at, there were so many different areas of bullying. People go to their jobs and they're afraid because their boss is bullying them. They're in a relationship, they're being bullied by the husband, or the wife is being, or the husband's being bullied by the wife. The children are being bullied when they go to school, but they're being bullied at home. So there's so much bullying going on. Where do we stop it? So that's where this topic came from, of bullying in today's society.
I'm going to ask a real tough question here to Linda. Anyone that want to jump in on this? How do you stop it?
That's a good question.
As
And the answer is, and I like this answer, it says it takes a village to raise a child. It takes all of us to stop it. Not one person can do it. But if we unite as a group, and more people unite with us, then through our voices then carry strength. That strength gives us power, and that power gives us the ability for those that are in charge to start listening, to create laws that will stop this. But until then, it's going to be swept under the rug and be like, it doesn't matter. And we're actually accepting it. We're actually giving our stamp of approval in one way or another, saying it doesn't matter if we don't speak up.
And you know, that's why this program, Bridging the Gap, was created. It used to be called Bridging the Generation Gap. And we used to hear so many young people that had a voice. They had opinions. There was something that they needed to say.
Yes.
So I say, why don't we give them a platform to do that? And Bridging the Gap, Bridging the Generation Gap was created when we have young people on the panel. They talk, now parents got to listen.
Right.
You'd be surprised how many parents got it. Their kids had a lot to say, and they didn't have a clue what was on their child's mind, which caused other areas. We have a young lady in the audience, Allison Smith, who's going to be doing my show at some point, and she's going to have topics herself because she goes to school. She's a very young lady. She wants to be a news person, you know, someone in that line of work. And she has a lot to deal with, a lot to say, because she sees a lot in her school. So who can say it better than someone in an environment that sees it and deals with it every day? So I'm really happy for Allison to be here, and I can't wait for her to do her first show, you know, so she can get that message out to people, you know, and say, hey, this is what I'm seeing at Bolingbrook High School. Now I want to express it to you, because unless you know about it, no one's going to do anything about it. So I'm really happy to get her on the show at some point. But give us the date and time again.
Yes, it's October the 12th at 5:30, and it's going to be at the Levy Center, the DuPage Levy Center right here in Bolingbrook, which is 241 Canterbury Lane. It's going to be very impactful. It's going to be very informative. Again, our dynamic keynote speaker is Mr. Patrick Dati. We're going to have a host of vendors, and we invite everyone to come out. It is free. And for anyone that's interested in being a part of our committee, all they have to do is just reach out. We're looking for more committee members. So if you're interested and you really want to make a difference, come on out and be a part of us. Our next board meeting is September the 28th at the Romeoville Police Department, and that meeting is at 5 o'clock.
You know, when I was probably on the first committee for it,
Yes.
Take Back the Night 19 years ago, and we really wanted to know what was the platform going to be about.
Yes.
And you guys have done an awesome job getting it to this level to where we're getting the more serious topics that people can actually pay attention to what's going on and help their lives and see exactly where they're going to go. Linda, you being who you are, and I've been knowing you a number of years, I've seen some of the work, heard some of the work you've done. Now we've talked about the kids, we've talked about the adults. What about the elderly people?
Oh, that's a big problem.
I know.
Elderly abuse probably ranks right up there in like the first or second levels, and it's usually family members. Mom gets sick and goes live with her son and daughter-in-law, or daughter, son-in-law, or whatever, and for whatever reason, and I'm not quite sure, there's and abuse takes several forms. There's financial exploitation. Son decides since mom's living in his house, he can spend all of mom's money. No, that's not how that works. Or they take physical advantage of mom or dad, and we can't forget dads, because they're in a weakened condition and they can no longer live on their own. And again, it's the same things. I do the same things with seniors that I do with everybody else. And I just have a different agency that I work with to help that. There's, it's called Adult Protective Services. It's kind of like DCFS for seniors. And they are amazing. And they have a whole host of people. And all I have to do is call them up and go, I think this is going on at this house. And they have attorneys that can get financial records. They can get phone records. They can get all kinds of stuff and actually do an investigation to see what is going on with mom or dad while they're living with their children. And it's a great thing. And within the last 3 months, we've actually had 4 people arrested for 2 were financial exploitation and 2 were for battery on a senior, which is an automatic felony, which is a really good thing, I think, because you should not be hitting people that can't hit back. And that's for any age, but really the elderly have done so much for us. Why are we doing this to them?
That's right. And that's the question. That's the reason why I ask you that, because I know you've dealt with that. I knew this show would go by pretty fast, so I'm going to ask each one of you to what message, you have about a minute, what message would you want to leave your viewing audience with based on bullying and domestic violence? I'm going to start with you, Ms. Foster.
Message I want to leave is that you can step into your own power anytime you want. You don't always have to become a victim. And once you realize that, just explore who you are, your values, and what it is you want to do, and start to shape the new you and step into your power.
Okay. Patrick?
A couple years ago, I did a campaign when my first website came out, You and Me Can Stop Bullies. And what I started to do is I had T-shirts designed that said You and Me Can Stop Bullies, and I promoted them on my website and actually did it as a charity and gave them to parents whose kids were being bullied and encouraged them to have their child wear the T-shirt to school. And it was amazing because it gave a message to the teachers that, you and me can stop bullies, and we should be. And it gave the bullies a message that, I'm not going to take it anymore. And with domestic violence, I think, it's dear and clear to my heart because I think that's where a lot of the damage in a family begins, whether it be abuse within the household or kids being bullied in general.
Your website now, can you give that website?
Sure. My first website is youandmecanstopbullies.com, and my new website with my advocacy work is patrickdati.com.
Okay, I'm sure people love to go there and see and get information from that. Linda, what would you like to leave the audience with?
I think the main thing I would like to have everybody know is that you don't have to live this way. If you really want to be out, and I know you really do, tell somebody, make a phone call. I'm in my office every day, hours and hours and hours every week. Call me, call somebody, and we will figure out how to get you out and how to get that to stop.
Is there a number you can give them in case they need?
Well, 911 is the quickest one.
Exactly, right.
So if something's going on, 911 is your best option. If it's a non-emergency thing, I'm sorry I don't have Bolingbrook's number, but my number to my police station is 815-886-7219. And just ask for Linda, ask for the social worker, ask for the social person. I'm just me. I'm the only one there, so I'm really easy to find. And I'm 24-hour connected to my building. So.
Well, people need to know that because someone could be sitting there listening and saying, I'm in that situation right now. Who can I reach out to? And giving them a number, you know, you could be getting, we have the non-emergency number, Reverend Harris, that they can call. And like you say, the best number is 911. But the one point I want to make too is that neighbors, protecting neighbors. You'd be surprised how many times that a neighbor will know that there's domestic violence going on right next door to them, and they refuse to get involved because I'm going to stay in my lane, I'm not getting in anybody's business. But yet still someone is being abused that could turn worse. So should they make that call?
Yes, by all means. You know, the funny thing about it, you know, and I like the word says, am I my brother's keeper? Yes, I am. I'm responsible for my neighbor. And my neighbor could be anybody. My neighbor don't just have to be the person next door to me. My neighbor could be the person down the block. But if I know that person is going through something, that they're being abused, then yeah, I'm supposed to say something, because if I don't, I'm just as guilty as the person doing the abuse, because I'm allowing it to happen without saying anything. But on the other side of that coin, now the person that's being abused, once I chime in and say, look, this is what's happening, now that person that's being abused needs to follow through by filling out the proper forms and getting this person, getting an order of protection and following that through. Because I've found, as being with the police department as a chaplain, that I've seen people that are abused, that when it came down to following through with that order of protection, they drop it. Well, they said they didn't really mean it, and I made them mad. And stop making excuses for adults. If this goes on, then you need to stop it. They need help. And the best way you can help them is not by being an enabler, but by stopping them, by allowing the law enforcement to come in and doing what you're asking them to do, and that's protect you.
Thank you, Reverend Harris. You know, I want to thank the camera people here. This was a very important topic tonight, and I want to thank them. These are volunteer people that come out and do this voluntarily away from their families. We got the singers that are at the controls. I want to thank them for doing this for us, because it's very important to do it.
Oh, yes.
But I want to thank you as a panel as well. And Patrick, thank you. I will be there on that date, no doubt. But thank you for coming and sharing your story, because I'm sure you can help a lot of people from doing something like this. So thank you, thank you, thank you. My name is Leroy Brown, and this is Bridging the Gap.